This will be a significant week for the future of European security after the summit, which took place in London, and the events which unraveled in Washington last week. An extraordinary European Council summit is set to take place. Heather Grabbe, senior fellow at the Bruegel think tank, joins me now to discuss what's next for Ukraine and the EU in terms of security and defense. Good evening and welcome to the program. Thank you for joining.
Good evening.
I guess it's only fair to start with one of the most talked about mishaps in foreign diplomacy, the fiasco between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. What's the path to the negotiating table now? What would have to happen for Zelensky and Trump to sit down together? We've heard from one of our correspondents that Mr. Trump requires a video apology. What's more?
Well, let's see what Trump asks for. I think that drama that Trump created shows very much the performative aspect of his presidency. Right now, where the action is in terms of trying to work out what happens next is in the European side, where we see following the summit in London on Sunday, a lot of concern, a lot of talks between European leaders on what they can do to guarantee Ukraine's security and to ensure continuing support to Zelensky. That's really where the action is, because what Trump is doing is realigning in the United States. This isn't just about Ukraine. Much more fundamentally, this is about Russia. And what Trump clearly did by allowing J.D. Vance to repeat Russian talking points in the meeting, unsubstantiated claims which the Russians have made, was to show that he was prepared to repeat these lines publicly. So what's really important now is that the Europeans reiterate their support. They find a plan to support Ukraine in very practical terms, both financially and militarily. And then what we see the famously unpredictable Trump do next. It's really difficult to negotiate with him because of these kinds of tactics.
And do you think that once Europe shows this sort of support and Mr. Trump sees that there is support from the EU, he's actually going to feel a little warmer when it comes to the idea of meeting Mr. Zelensky at the table?
Very hard to predict that, because there's so many other issues around this in the way that he views the world, and also we don't really know what his long-term strategy is. Is this about trying to get an alliance with Russia with a view to China? It's not that there's a well-worked-out foreign policy doctrine that he has presented, which makes sense of this behavior. What's really fundamental now is to ensure that Europeans look to their own security, that there's a continued understanding among European leaders that Europe can't be secure while Ukraine is not secure, and therefore there needs to be continued European support to Ukraine. But it's also really vital that the Europeans match the good words that they've uttered over the past couple of days with deeds, particularly getting together the funding for defence and ensuring that they have a united line when it comes to Ukraine. Divisions in Europe would be the most dangerous thing at this point.
After the meeting which took place in London, we've heard from a number of experts, and one of the opinions is the meeting in London delivered plenty promises but few concrete solutions. What's your opinion on this statement?
Well, it's not surprising that it will take a few rounds for leaders to come together. Already the fact that they expressed, all of them, those who were present in London, very firm support for Ukraine and warm welcome for Zelensky is very significant. It showed that they are going to continue their support regardless of Trump's attitude. It was also very significant that they were prepared to start talking in earnest about issues that have been taboo until quite recently. Issues around funding, around joint procurement, really talking about a significant European approach to defence, European security strategy, if you like, which hasn't really been there before. And the fact that they were talking directly to Zelensky is also really significant. These are not things that Europeans are going to do above the heads of Ukrainians. It's with the Ukrainians. So all of that symbolism and their serious talks, and also all the parts of the talks which have not been made public, all of that is significant, and will help to move things forward. But yeah, we're not at a very clear peace plan yet, and it will take a while for the practical steps to follow to emerge.
We've heard that European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is about to send a letter to EU member state leaders about rearming Europe. How realistic is a plan like this, and how much money actually would it take, and what would be the timeline for such a plan?
Well, there's already a timeline ahead for European leaders to discuss this in some detail. Next Thursday, on the 6th of March, there will be a European Council summit at which Zelensky will again be present. That will be with all 27 EU member states, because remember, in London, you had 14 NATO members. It wasn't all of the EU member states. So next Thursday, all the EU member states will meet and discuss it. Then there will be the presentation of the Defence White Paper by the Defence Commissioner Kubilius, which is due on the 19th of March, and that will then be discussed by the member states. And that plan should have more details in it in terms of the funds that are required, because Kubilius and his team have been putting together some quite detailed estimates. I would reckon that we really need to be thinking about 200 to 300 billion. That's going to be something that member states have to come up with in some form. And there are a number of options on the table for how to achieve that level of funding, and also how much of it should be delivered at national level for national procurement, and how much should be at EU level. And then there's the question of how much of the procurement should be done by individual countries and how much should be done jointly. Doing it jointly would bring cost savings and efficiencies because of larger orders and more negotiating power by the EU member states. So it makes sense to do that. There are many details to be worked out, but I've never seen in my long years of observing how the EU behaves on these things, such a rapid move towards very concrete funding on defence, and also of getting member states together to make sincere commitments. So I think there's a great deal of political will at the moment, and it would be important for the EU to concretise that into an action plan over the next couple of months. And I expect that they will do that. I think that by now it's very clear that there are a lot of things that can't await the formation of a new coalition government in Germany, and which need decisions earlier than that. So we're seeing a much faster pace of decision making than is normal in the EU.
Let's try and understand the funding behind the rearmament. You mentioned 200 to 300 billion for rearmament. There is a suggestion that funds should come from cohesion fund, and the question is, wouldn't this give too much power to the EU Commission, to the detriment of the EU member states? What's your opinion on this?
I don't think it's an issue about the Commission. The whole EU budget, the multi-annual financial framework, as it's called, is only about 1% of EU GDP. So even if the whole of it were dedicated to defence, that wouldn't be enough. And in any case, a lot of that money is already allocated to agricultural subsidies and also to regional funding. As you say, some of the regional funding could be devoted not to armaments, but to infrastructure which has dual use. So things like upgrading bridges so that they could also be used for tanks, upgrading of airports and other kinds of transport infrastructure, which could also be used for military purposes. So it is possible to use some of the regional funds in this way, but that's a pretty small amount of money in comparison with what's needed. And it wouldn't be directly, for sure, for arms purchases. So I expect there could be some bits of money found in the EU budget, some unspent funds and some redirection of funding, but the bulk of it is going to have to be new money. So that will have to come from national budgets. It may come also from debt financing, either of member states issuing debt themselves in the form of government bonds, or of some kind of special purpose vehicle of joint debt financing. And that's what's being discussed a great deal at the moment. Now, the 200 to 300 billion is what's needed now, probably be more over time, because this is about not only funding support to Ukraine, but also building up the kinds of defense capabilities that European countries would need also to replace all of the strategic assets and enablers that the United States has provided for a long time. So we're nowhere near the end of this. That initial amount of money would be important to raise now to be a deterrent to Russia and for Europe to be able to build up its strategic autonomy. But I think we've got a number of years ahead of us in which defense will continue to be a major policy and funding priority.
We spoke about the European security, European defense, but we've heard about Finland, together with Norway, actually providing support in developing a peace plan that is already in the works by the United Kingdom and France. But there seems to be some sort of mixed messaging, and I wanted to ask you, do we know what the plan involves, and why is there so little communication around it?
Well, I don't know what the plan involves, and it's not surprising that these things are not being made public as they're being negotiated. These are very important and sensitive issues for national governments to decide, and national leaders have got to explain to their people why such large sums of money would be going into such a plan, and also whether it would involve committing troops. And in what form and how and so on. These are not things that they can thrash out in public as they discuss them with partners. So it's not surprising that this is not being played out in public. Mm-hmm. But it's really important that all of the member states of the EU get on the same page as regards where the threats are coming from and the scale of the response that's needed to those threats.
Unfortunately, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but unfortunately our time on the program has come to an end. Thank you for joining me, Heather Grabbe, Senior Fellow at Bruegel. It was a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you. And so this marks the end of World News Tonight. Please do stay tuned here on TVP World and join us for more news and features coming in just a moment.